I was researching for this case, I already knew what I was going in for because I did watch the Netflix documentary Monsters about Jeffrey Dahmer, but that's it. That's the only Netflix limited information I had about him, and that too was like 2 years ago. And now, at the time of making this video, and after reading all the documents and articles about him, I came to realize how terrifying the real case was. My very first thought about this case wasn't just the numbers of his victims or how he killed them. Instead, what disturbed me the most was how he was caught. And let me tell you exactly why. On July 22, 1991, Dahmer approached 3 men with an offer of $100 to accompany him to his apartment to pose for nude photographs, drink beer, and simply keep him company. And one of the 3 men, a 32-year-old Tracy Edwards, agreed to accompany him.
Spell your last name for us.
Tracy Edwards, Edwards.
Edward and Dahmer left the bar and took a walk to Dahmer's apartment. Apartment 213 in the Oxford Apartments, located at 924 North 25th Street, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. As soon as Edward entered Dahmer's apartment, he noted a very foul odor. And on the floor, he saw several boxes of hydrochloric acids. When he asked about it, Dahmer replied by saying he used them to clean bricks. Everything was going normal at that point, but after some minor conversation, Dahmer asked Edward to take a look at his tropical fish. And as Edward turned his head, Dahmer made his first move. He placed a handcuff on Edward's wrist, but he was only able to put handcuffs on one of his hands. Edward panicked and asked, "What's happening?" And without replying to him, Dahmer made a second attempt to cuff his wrists together, but he was unsuccessful. Dahmer said he just wanted to take some nude pictures of him, so he asked him to accompany him to his bedroom, where Edward saw a blue 57-gallon drum in the corner, and he could smell the disgusting odor coming out of it. Edward's sixth sense took over, and he realized that something very wrong is happening. But at this point, unlucky Edward had to be very careful what he said next, because Dahmer had a huge knife pointed towards him. So, the next words out of his mouth could have been either a lifesaver or a death sentence. To calm the situation, Edward assured Dahmer that he was a friend and tried to seduce him by unbuttoning himself, which was the luckiest thing he could have done because little he knew that Dahmer had some weird fetish about unbuttoned male chest, which I will talk about later. But at this point, Edward saw Dahmer rocking back and forth and chanting before turning his attention back to him. He placed his head on Edward's chest, listened to his heartbeat, and said that he wants to eat his heart. But somehow, Edward convinced Dahmer to go back to the living room where the air conditioning was. Sitting on the couch, Edward waited for the perfect moment before attacking Dahmer. And as soon as he saw that Dahmer was not holding his handcuffs, he made his move. He attacked Dahmer, and Dahmer lost his balance. And Edward made his run from the front door, screaming for help and police, half naked and handcuffs on one wrist. At 11:30 p.m., Edward found 2 Milwaukee police officers at the corner of North 25th Street. And then Edwards explained everything to the cops, and later that night, those police officers searched Dahmer's apartment, where they discovered graphic Polaroid pictures of his victims. Dahmer would later confess everything without hesitation, and this would become the biggest news in the history of Milwaukee. And the reason I say why I find this the most disturbing part of the whole case is because Dahmer was caught because one of his victims escaped, and not because of any police investigation. Because, for 1 second, imagine, what if Jeffrey Dahmer also killed him? He would have never been caught at all, and how many more lives would have been ruined? Because it wasn't just the victims who suffered, but their families as well. The second most controversial detail I found was people debating whether Dahmer was actually a psychopath or was product of his childhood trauma. So, to decide this, let's take a look at his childhood. Unlike you and me, Dahmer didn't have an ordinary childhood. Before he was even born, his mother, Joyce, used to take around 20-25 pills a day for her anxiety, depression, and hormonal changes during pregnancy, even though there is no scientific links that his mother's pills habit made Dahmer the way he was. But his father, Lionel, often blamed her for Jeffrey's condition. He also blamed himself. Although intelligent and hardworking, he was distant, absent, and perhaps too wrapped up in his scientific career to provide the emotional support that his child needed. The first obvious shift appeared after a hernia surgery at age 4. Before the operation, Dahmer was reportedly cheerful, curious, even social. Afterward, he became strangely withdrawn, quiet, emotionally distant, as though something had been switched off inside him. By his early school years, Jeffrey was already showing unusual fascinations. Unlike other children who loved pets and games, Dahmer was fascinated by the bones of animals. He would collect roadkill, strip the carcasses, and store body parts in jars with formaldehyde. He was exposed to alcohol by age 14, sneaking liquor into school, and even drinking in class to numb his thoughts and quiet the inner chaos. At the same time, his fantasies were taking a darker turn towards violence, control, and necrophilia. He later admitted that as a teenager he was already imagined sex with unconscious or dead men. And then came the parental divorce in 1978, a crucial breaking point. Jeffrey, 18 at the time, was left completely alone in the family house while his parents fought bitterly in court. Alone and drowning in alcohol, Dahmer acted out the dark fantasy that had been simmering for years. He picked up a hitchhiker, Stephen Hicks, lured him home, and killed his first victim. He admitted feeling excitement in dominating lifeless bodies, in turning humans into objects. He manipulated police officers, convinced neighbors he was harmless, hid horrors inside his apartment while smiling politely in public. These are hallmarks of psychopathy, lack of empathy, manipulation, double lives. Yet, we cannot ignore the fact that every layer of his childhood history, prenatal drug exposure, unstable parents, emotional neglect, medical trauma, adolescent isolation, parental abandonment, provides a clear map of environmental damage that amplified his inner evil. And lastly, we come to the most disturbing and chilling part of the whole video, Dahmer's killing techniques. But before that, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to watch more horror and crime-related videos. Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes were not only shocking because of the sheer brutality, but also because of the way he selected and killed his victims. A pattern that forces us to ask, what exactly was motivating him? When Dahmer began his murders in 1978 with Stephen Hicks, it almost appeared impulsive. He invited Hicks home to drink, panicked when Hicks wanted to leave, and killed him with a dumbbell before dismembering and scattering the remains. Yet as the years progressed, the killings became increasingly deliberate. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, he had perfected a pattern. He would target young men, usually from marginalized backgrounds, African American, Asian, Latino, often gay or bisexual. His sexual orientation and desires determined the type of men he lured, while his awareness of their social vulnerability gave him the confidence that he could kill repeatedly without getting caught. Also, his hunting ground was carefully chosen: gay bars, clubs, and bathhouses in Milwaukee, places where young men could be approached under the guise of casual encounters. Dahmer would lure them back to his apartment with promises of money for nude photos, alcohol, or simply companionship, which we saw in the Edwards case. His first murder, Hicks, happened precisely because Dahmer could not bear to let him leave. That theme repeated across nearly every killing. The moment his partners wanted to go home, Dahmer turned them into permanent possessions by killing them. Unlike some serial killers who relied on torture, Dahmer's method was first drugging them and then strangling them to death. According to him, he didn't want them to suffer. That's why he used to drug them in the first place. Once dead, the victims became objects for Dahmer's compulsions. He dismembered bodies, not to dispose of the evidence, but to keep them as trophies, skulls, bones, and organs that he would preserve in acid, bleach, or freezers. He photographed each stage of dismemberment, building an archive of possession he could revisit even when no victim was present. Perhaps the darkest evolution of his killing techniques came when Dahmer began experimenting with zombie making. Dissatisfied with corpses because they couldn't move or do anything, obviously, he wanted living bodies that would remain docile and under his command. To achieve this, he drilled holes into the skulls of victims and poured acid or boiling water directly into their brains, hoping to erase consciousness while keeping the body alive. This horrifying medical experimentation reflects both a complete lack of empathy and a chilling ingenuity, traits that fit well within the framework of psychopaths. At the end of all this, though, one fact stands immovable. Whatever shaped him, whatever theories we construct, Jeffrey Dahmer became a monster who killed 17 young men and boys, dismembered them, desecrated their bodies, and inflicted trauma on families that will never heal. So now, I want you guys to tell me, what do you think is the most chilling part of this whole case, and how you could escape someone like him?